Hello, and welcome to Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. We're coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. Today on the program, the government shutdown is over, or is it? Pete Buttigieg is running for president, or is he? And how are things going on over at the legislature? We're joined today by our panel of political pundits. From my right, which would be your left, my good friend Brad Klopfenstein, Libertarian. Brad, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Abdul.
Democrat and political commentator Lara Beck. Lara, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Abdul.
Famous political writer and Indianapolis Monthly and new proud papa dad, Adam Wren. Adam, congratulations, and thanks for getting 5 minutes to get away.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And, of course, everybody's favorite agitator, conservative talk show host, Rob Kendall. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
today.
Abdul.
All right. Well, my friends, let's go ahead and talk about the government shutdown. The government was closed for 35 days as we tape this program. It is open, but there's no guarantee that the government will be open for a couple of more weeks. This is all centered around a wall. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer saying no wall. Donald Trump saying no, but we're going to just go ahead and start moving forward. So, Adam, you have a lot of contacts out in D.C. Are people getting ready for a second government shutdown?
You know, I was on the Hill on Tuesday when Mitch McConnell and Senator Todd Young came out and spoke with the media, and he deployed his, famous line, which is, no one benefits from the second kick of a mule. And I think that he is going to do everything in his power to avoid a second shutdown. I don't think there's any appetite for that in D.C. right now.
Who wins the second? Does the second government shutdown benefit anybody, Laura? I mean, the conventional wisdom is that Nancy Pelosi scored a victory on the first one, but sometimes the second act is a little bit harder to follow than the first act.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wins. Anytime you shut down the government or partially shut it down and you put 800,000 people out of work and without a paycheck. So I don't think anyone wins, not to mention the government contractors as well. Nancy Pelosi did really do a terrific job at bringing the shutdown to an end. Although Abdul and I were joking the other day about my subscription to the Wall Street Journal paying off, and there was an article in yesterday about institutions and how it really wasn't Nancy Pelosi who Trump ceded to; it was James Madison, because it was the power of the purse, and it was referring to. So anyway, it was my moment of intellectual curiosity. But nobody really wins. I think they are going to try and avoid it as much as possible, because if Trump really will look really terrible if he does another one of these. So I think we're hopefully not headed to one. Rob,
let me jump over you, because obviously you're a big supporter of the president. You're on your radio show, weblog, and podcast. What does the president do the second go-around? Did he just realize, hey, I'm not going to get my wall, declare a national emergency, and let it go, fight through the courts, declare victory, then immediately retreat?
So this was when the Republicans admitted to an entire generation that we have lied to you about this idea of cutting spending. We've lied to you about this idea of government reform, that this was all just a scam to get conservative people to vote for them. Because we now can't shut down non-essential government. And if you can't shut down non-essential government, then there's no way you're actually going to take on the things that are driving our debts and our deficits. Trump made a huge mistake because now he's backed himself into a corner. If it wasn't a national emergency 21 days ago, how could it be a national emergency now? Nothing's changed. Nothing's going to change. And quite frankly, him declaring a national emergency would be a Pandora's box, because if it's Kamala Harris as the next president, is climate change a national emergency? He had the leverage. He gave it up. I don't know what he's going to do.
Not only 21 days ago, but if it was a national emergency, why wasn't it a national emergency when he controlled both houses of Congress? I mean, why wasn't it an emergency in the first 2 years? Substantively, no statistics show that the problem is getting worse.
Brad, obviously we can have the discussion about the size, scope, government. What should government do? How much should we spend? Is this really the forum to do that?
No, this whole thing's off the chain. Rob is right. Rob, you're only 25 years behind me on figuring out Republicans don't stand for cutting government. That's not their thing. Adam's right. They had 2 years to get this done when Trump had the House and the Senate. He didn't get it done. I don't know why he's pushing it now. However, libertarians believe tall fences, wide gates. I think that there's room for conversation on this. The one thing that really concerns me is I remember growing up and we'd hear about third world countries and how they'd have government employees that hadn't been paid in 6 months. That's us. I mean, we are that country now. And that pains me a little bit.
Doesn't it bother anybody, though, that we had 800,000 people on the public dole that are deemed not essential? No, nobody's talking about that. 800,000 people How many are the essentials then? I mean, this
but here's
Well, I think when air traffic was grounded at LaGuardia, we learned about essential.
You see, and to me,
well.
that has always been what the issue is, which has been like, okay, when people say, well, they're just government employees, now they can just stay home and they're going to get a paycheck at the end of all this. Well, I'm not sure if you want your air traffic controller doing Uber on the weekends.
Right.
You're just asking.
Yeah.
You're just asking for trouble and a disaster. Adam, let me jump back over to you here. Right now, you've got House and Senate conferees sort of getting together and chatting. I mean, this isn't we want to spend $10 billion, you want to spend $5 billion, we'll split the difference at $7 billion. This is pretty much either you get a wall or you don't. You only build it half as long or half as high, so only really tall illegal immigrants can step over it. I mean, how do you do this? I mean, or is there room for compromise at all?
I think as the best compromise that the Trump administration is going to see is something like $1.5 billion for increased technology and increased border security. But I just think the wall is not going to happen at this point. And if you can't get that done in the first 2 years of your administration, and you're losing independence and you're losing even a certain percentage of your base, how do you get it done in the second term? I mean, what do you say to voters during a re-election campaign? The campaign slogan so far has been promises made, promises kept, and what's happening on the wall doesn't figure into that.
Kind of like mission accomplished.
Does a wall have to be a
or if you like your plan, you can keep it.
Wow. So what you guys are saying?
Oh, Rob, we were doing so well.
In other words, what you guys are saying is the only consistency in politics is inconsistency. Yeah.
We were really doing great. It's a good thing we're on the other side of the table today.
But I guess the question when you get this sort of wall issue before we move on to the next topic, does it have to be a physical wall border security? Because if you saw the news this past week, $3 million worth of illegal drugs that were caught weren't somebody sneaking through the desert on the back of a mule. It was in a truck under a bunch of lettuce and fruit.
It was a port of entry as
yes.
well.
Yeah.
The real wall, I think, is turning out to be the friends we made along the way.
That's the story of our life. You're watching Indiana Issues, the public affairs program, where we go beyond the headlines and sound bites to bring you all the big issues in their entirety. Brad Klopfenstein, Lara Beck, Adam Wren, and Rob Kendall are our guests. Other big news item, ladies and gentlemen, Indiana making a little bit of national news. South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, one of the latest Democrats to announce that doing an exploratory committee for president. He'll be the youngest person ever elected. But even though his electoral experience has only been being mayor, he does have an extensive military background. Also, a member of the LGBT community. However, even here in Indiana, when we polled Indy Politics this past October, only 66% of Hoosiers did not know who he was. So, Brad, you've been in politics for a while. Is Pete Buttigieg just one of those dark horse candidates that just kind of nobody really notices at first, but pops up out of nowhere?
I think he is. He might have done himself a favor to maybe run for re-election. However, he certainly has aspirations on a national level. He seems to be fairly well received on a national level, and whether that ends up being a cabinet post or being vice president or, he ran for national chairman one time. He might want to do that again. I think he's still in a pretty good position, and possibly had he served another term, South Bend maybe had a snowstorm that would have, derailed what he was doing. I think he's in a good position where he does not have a lot of enemies right now, and I think not having a track record but being respected is going to serve him well.
Rob, let me ask you, is Pete Buttigieg one of those dark horse candidates that Republicans should be worried about? For example, it's always the big names that usually have a lot of a long extensive record. Your Kamala Harris's, your Cory Booker's, but somebody like a Pete Buttigieg, yes, he was mayor, but he doesn't have sort of that national profile that you can easily attack.
Well, I did a little research, Abdul, and by every measurable standard, Brownsburg, where I was a town councilman, eclipsed South Bend from 2012 to 2015. So by that standard, I'm qualified to run for president, which I'm not, and nobody should want me to run for president. Other than, and I keep asking this question, and I will wait for somebody to tell me what it is, other than I'm gay, what is appealing about Pete Buttigieg to be president? He has not done a good job as mayor of South Bend. Most of his initiatives have not come to fruition. So what's the argument? We respect his military service, but outside of that, what's the argument?
I think his argument that he's been trotting out when he gets that experience question is that he has more government service than Donald Trump. He has more executive experience than Governor Mike Pence, and he has more military experience than both of them put together. And if you look at his record, he's a Rhodes Scholar. He's a Harvard University grad. He spent 3 years as a McKinsey consultant in the business world. What else do you want on a resume like that?
But Adam, when you look at South Bend, is that really a place you want to put up and go, look at what I did? I don't see anything in South Bend that you go, look at what I did.
Actually, what I think is funny is you're comparing apples to oranges. Brownsburg is in a donut community, for example, so it does get some spillover economic development from Indianapolis. South Bend has really undergone an economic development renaissance, and based on where it is, I was just actually up there a couple weeks ago because I've got a client there.
Can we remote this show and tour South Bend and we'll do the show
it's
live?
great,
South
but
Bend?
here's the thing about Mayor Pete, as he is called. We are at such a crossroads with our national politics, and sometimes having someone come in who doesn't have a lot of baggage is really appealing. And he has some incredibly good, thoughtful, insightful answers, especially when he's asked about his experience, his the work he's done growing up in South Bend, being mayor of South Bend. I mean, as you know from being on the town council, you get the call when something goes wrong, right? I mean, you get the call when somebody's pipes are frozen and they don't know what to do. I mean, you're the one who gets the call. So you are used to dealing with some very minutia quality of life issues. And as far as him being gay and being married, it's pretty clear that millennials really don't care. And most people really don't care. As my sister says, anybody under the age of 50 just really doesn't care. And I think that it's a big step for us as a country because it isn't the lead in most of these stories.
Although Buttigieg has announced he's let's say forming that exploratory committee. It's not official yet. Does he actually have, Brad, let me ask you, maybe sort of an inside straight? Because if you look at who's announced for president so far, your Cory Bookers, your Kamala Harrises, your Elizabeth Warrens, Hildebrand, and these guys, they almost sort of cannibalize, the progressive left wing of the Democratic Party. So somebody like, a Pete Buttigieg or more moderate candidate, okay, while you guys are divvying up all the folks over here, I'm just going to go walk through here because I just need a plurality, not a majority.
Right. And I think Democrats have suffered from basically they keep swinging hard left as a party, and their leaders seem to be hard left side of that party. Mayor Pete is on the right side of the Democratic Party, moderate, and I mean Republicans have suffered from this as well. They've put up a lot of left wingers from their party. I think Pete kind of gets back into the middle. He's interesting. He's not real far out there as far as his stances. I could see him being palatable to a lot of people.
I think. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think the biggest mistake in that analysis is assuming that the old left-right spectrum is still what we're working with today. I mean, Donald Trump, more than anybody else, has shattered that and has taken positions from the left, has taken positions from the right, and has re-engineered a political calculus. Pete Buttigieg is in the same mold, although he takes different positions. He talks about fiscal conservatism. He talks about having a thoughtful approach to our foreign policy, and he talks about the debt that millennials like me have been saddled with by a former generation. And so I think
baby boomers, not Gen X. I just want to make that
right,
clear.
Right, yeah.
right.
We're too busy in the corner listening to Joshua Tree. That's what somebody said. They don't even put us on the screen anymore.
To Adam's point, if you look at the elections 2012 to 2016, the Democrat-Republican vote stayed pretty much static. The only growth came with Greens and Libertarians. And I think you're right, Adam, that the left-right doesn't hold anymore. Suddenly it's more of a diamond shape, and you've got a lot of other players in the game.
Well, and one of the things that Mayor Buttigieg has articulated so well, and it's a frustration within the Democratic Party, and I think we're going to talk about this today when we talk about the DCCC and the targeting lists. But we don't do a good job of looking to the Midwest for candidates. We just don't. And that's where, as a governor, as a mayor, as a senator, as a congressperson, you really have to govern from the middle. You can't govern as you would, say, if you're in New York or Massachusetts or California or some of these districts. So that was one of the messages that he really articulated when he ran for national chair, not state chair. And I think we're going to hear a lot about that from him as well, is that there is a strong voice that's literally just being ignored. And he is the type of leader, I think, who can really put that voice out there.
You're watching Indiana Issues, the weekly public affairs program. We'll go beyond the headlines and sound bites. So to go into the big issues of the day, we're going to take a little bit of a break from our panel. We come back. Is Susan Brooks a target? Speaking of which, by the DCCC. And what's been going on at the State House lately? We'll ask our panel in just a bit. Coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. You're watching Indiana Issues. Welcome back to Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. We're joined today by Brad Klopfenstein, Libertarian, Democrat Lara Beck, Adam Wren, political writer and commentator, and conservative talk show host Rob Kendall. Talk about the big issues facing Hoosiers across the state of Indiana. My friends, this week, CNN reporting that 5th District Congresswoman Susan Brooks is among 33 House seats being targeted by the Democrats in 2020, looking to build success that they had down in Texas. One of the big questions, though, however, is Susan Brooks a viable target? Because when I went back and looked at the last election over Dee Thornton, she won by more than 13 points. So, Adam, let me start with you. Is Susan Brooks just sort of wishful thinking?
What's fascinating to me about that news is just a week before, the NRCC had tapped Brooks as being someone who should recruit more female candidates for them in that same year. So just as she's beginning to look for other candidates, her own seat is becoming vulnerable. I live in that district. She's my congresswoman, but there's been a significant shift over the last 4 to 6 years of how voters approach politics in that district. It's becoming a bluer district, and so this news wasn't surprising to me.
Any shock or surprise, Laura, that Susan Brooks would be a target? Because in the last election, even though Susan did win the district by 13 points, she lost the Marion County portion of the 5th Congressional District, which goes into Marion, Hamilton, Tipton, and a few other parts north.
Well, I agree with Adam. The district is changing, and I think finding the right candidate for that district is really important. There have been some names tossed around, such as Christina Hale. I mean, if you were going to look on paper at who the perfect candidate is for that district, she would definitely be at the top of the list. One of the elements, too, when you're looking at those numbers, if you go back the last few elections, not just the last election, she's winning, but she's not winning by as much each time. So that, I think, with the shift in demographics and the change, especially too, 2020 is a Trump year. So we have no idea what's also going to be happening then as well. It does speak, though, to the philosophy that Representative Sherry Bustos, who's a Midwestern Congresswoman out of Illinois, is really applying here. It's almost that 50-state strategy that Howard Dean used to really be competitive in these districts, and I think it's great.
Rob, when you look at the 5th District, though, even though a good chunk of it is in the Marion County is a good portion of it, and Democrats tend to do well, it's still a very Republican district.
Yeah, but it wouldn't harm me in the least or bother me in the least if she lost. I mean, she's been there for how many terms now? What has she done? Again, a big bunch of nothing. These people, just like Pete Buttigieg, just like her, they're obsessed with being in public office. Go home, get another job, do something else. And let's not forget who her husband is, a guy so powerful that he literally got Todd Young on the ballot despite not getting 500 signatures.
You're still holding a grudge on that one, aren't you?
But it's this insider swampy stuff, Abdul.
You're still holding a grudge on Dave
but it's
Brooks?
ridiculous. But that just shows it's who you are. It's who you're connected to. That is politics. We need new people, and if the Republicans got to lose a seat to get somebody like that out of there, fine.
No, or just Dave is just that good of an attorney.
Yeah, those magic signatures in those pews in Lake County. They were just showing up left and right.
All right.
He's a regular Ben Matlock.
That's right. Hey, welcome, folks, to the next episode of Fight the Last War. Brad, let me ask you, like I said, obviously, that is a district, Fishers is changing. We saw some of the people that you and I know very well, a lot of Republican lawmakers, not win by, the margins that they used to. And even the Hamilton County chairwoman had to put the whole party on notice saying, hey, guys, guess what? You can't just take it for granted that this is going to be a Republican county from here on out.
Well, it is changing. It's not changing 13 points. But to Rob's point, and this is why this might be a target, Susan Brooks is not real popular within the Republican Party in that area. So as the Republican Party base is eroded somewhat, and Hamilton County has their own civil war within the Republican Party up there, it could be a vulnerable seat 4 years from now, maybe. But I don't see it. I don't see it. I think that'd be a waste of money if they threw money at it.
Laura, let me ask you, there are some other seats out there in Indiana that Democrats could probably target. Jackie Walorski in the second, Trey Hollingsworth in the ninth, and even to a lesser degree, maybe a Larry Bouchon in the eighth, or Jim Barrett that they tried to knock off over in the fourth. Why go for Susan? Why not try one of those other districts?
I think it has a lot to do probably with the district specifically and the demographic makeup, the education makeup, the proximity to Indianapolis. I think that has a lot to do with it there. We don't typically have a lot of targeted races each cycle from the DCCC. We maybe have 1, 2, somewhere in there, if that. And to be a targeted race is important, but if you're running a targeted race, it's really probably one of the most miserable experiences of your life. So there's an incredible amount of pressure that's going to come with that. And when you look at the other districts that are on that list, they're similar to Indiana 5. So I'm not surprised that they're only targeting this one.
One of the reasons they may feel pressure to go now is that the Republicans will re-gerrymander that district after 2020.
Yeah,
so this may be the best chance for them.
Could be.
Yeah, for some strange reason, I see the 5th District moving from 96th Street to maybe Route 32,
right,
38, right across
exactly.
the north part.
So we get really great representation.
That's one way to look at it.
It reflects the district, right?
Yeah, you're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of Indy Politics and Order. Roundtable discussion. Statehouse Check-In. We're almost about a month or so into the legislative process. Still, lots of bills out there. Bills have passed on the issue of school safety, but teacher pay, bias crimes still waiting in the wings. We still got a big old chunk of gaming to deal with. Adam, let me start with you. How are lawmakers doing?
There's an old dictum that work expands to
fill the little void.
Yeah, to fill the void. So, I am not surprised. I think it's going to be a busy final 3 or 4 weeks of the General Assembly, and so I don't think we're going to see a lot of movement on these. It's fascinating to me that Speaker Brian Bosma sort of punted to the Senate on the hate crimes legislation this week. Senator Roderick Bray, the pro tem, really now has to decide whether to move that out of Rules Committee, which it looks like he's going to do in the next couple of weeks. But it's going to be a languid, slow process to see some of these big bills to have real action on them, I think.
Brad, how are lawmakers doing?
Right now, they're on vacation, just about. They're doing okay.
But as a libertarian, isn't that your preference?
It is, yeah. I want the government to shut down. I want there to be gridlock. I want nothing to pass.
You just want everybody hanging out at the Antelope Club.
I do. And I'm fine with the budget staying the same size as it was last year. As far as lawmakers, Adam's right that not a whole lot goes on in the first half, and then it's not until it goes into the second half where there's a bunch of legislation that didn't pass its original chamber that they're trying to slide in on the back end.
Yeah.
That's when it gets a little frantic and hard to keep up. So
they weren't even able to get their job done on the last day last time. So.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's going to be a frantic last 2 weeks, and I don't see the bias crime legislation passing. I could be wrong, but that's just my spidey sense talking.
From everything I've been able to pick up so far, is it is much easier for it to pass without a list than with a list. From all the conversations I've had with Indiana lawmakers right now, Representative Greg Sturwald of Avon sort of has legislation that sort of defines it as sort of an immutable characteristic, but it doesn't have race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, just sort of immutable characteristics. Probably as we come down to the wire here. We've got about 5 minutes or so left in the program. Any lawmakers missing the boat on anything? I know what the answer is, but I just want to hear you say it.
Well, it's interesting the pockets of constituencies that are starting to get upset with these guys. And if they have the ability to unite, they can form a front that'll be interesting. You've got the medical marijuana people who are really well organized who are upset. You've still got the alcohol people who are really upset about lack of cold beer sales, lack of Sunday sales. Then the chairman of the Indiana Republican Party magically investing in 31 liquor stores. You've got the gaming people that are still very skeptical anything's going to get done. So you have these large pockets of people who in their each special interest are angry with the Indiana Republican Party, but can they unite to make some sort of change and difference?
So are you announcing you're running for governor or something?
I'm announcing nothing. Nothing. Rob, but you'll be the first to know.
Rob, you let me know when we have to change seats.
Laura, let me get you to jump in here as we get ready to wind down the program.
I think anything can happen, especially as you're getting, especially in a budget year. I just think anything can happen. It's been interesting because we talked a little bit with the chamber folks on Inside Indiana Business yesterday about the poll they put out and the point I was making. I think that, I don't know if it went across very well, but our big challenge is a lot of these are very common sense, logical, reasonable, fact-based initiatives, but until we don't have gerrymandering or we have an independent redistricting commission redrawing these districts, a lot of these things that have bipartisan support are just not going to get passed. And the Republicans, I just don't think they have the political will to do hate crimes. I really don't.
And let me get you to jump in real quick before we go to our final topic.
I'm really fascinated to see what Governor Holcomb is going to do over the final weeks of the General Assembly and in the coming weeks. What is he waiting to do with his political capital? How is he going to spend it? He's come out on this in a State of the State address, but how many arms is he willing to twist in his office to make this happen? If it doesn't happen, I think you could really see some frustration from the business community. If it's not going to happen this year, I don't know when it's going to happen.
True.
Now let's go to our friends, our final category of the program, our predictions, prognostications, where we all look into the political ether, see what is out there. Brad Klopfenstein, we will start with you.
I think the government shuts down yet again on the federal level. On some of these state initiatives, I don't think you're going to see anything earth-shattering come out of the State House this year. There's no reason to do it. They've got super majorities, and all those constituencies that Rob was talking about, they just don't have enough traction.
Laura?
I'd say watch Pete Buttigieg. I think he has had a great rollout. It's been a very solid rollout, and we're going to see a lot more of him. And he's got a book coming out, and I think it's going to be very positive for him and for us.
I think Indiana's May primary in 2020 is once again going to make us Importantville. I think we're going to see a lot of Democratic candidates here. I don't think the nomination is going to be settled by then. I think we're going to see a big field, and they're going to lavish a lot of attention on the heartland here in Indiana.
And Importantville is Adam's newsletter that you should all
which is
subscribe to.
Right after I write the cheat sheet, I read Importantville.
It's a must read for Lara Beck. Must read.
House Bill 1594, and that is authored by Todd Houston. As we all know, if Todd Houston is involved in something, it's very important and a priority. It deals essentially with tolling. If you'll recall last year when the governor did his war on truckers, he arbitrarily decided how all that money was going to be spent. The legislature was upset, not that he raised taxes by $1 billion, but they didn't get to say how it got spent. So now they want to take control over the tolling again. So keep an eye on that.
My prediction, keep an eye out for that period between Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day, because for some strange reason, that is a period when all things just blow up at the legislature. That is when it happens. And so keep an eye out for that thing that nobody knows what it is, but it's coming. Our guests today have been Libertarian Brad Klopfenstein, Democrat Lara Beck, political writer and commentator Adam Wren, and conservative talk show host Rob Kendall. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Thank you all very much for joining us. We came to you today from our good friends at Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. We'll talk to you next time on Indiana Issues. Let me guess.